fans, Ryan Aho here, and the one and only Bert Lehman, bringing you episode 177 of A Blast to the Past, where the folks from the One to Go show turn back time, turn back the clock, and talk about drivers from the past, right? People that, specifically, if it's 177, it's drivers with the number 77, right? But we talk about past drivers, maybe some past winners from the year 1977, a little trivia. So race fans, if you enjoy this show, right? If you like racing history, if you have a favorite driver that has a number that's coming up, like next week's going to be episode 178. If you have a favorite 78, hit us up, right? Text us, message us, shoot us a comment with some people that you know that have that number, some pictures, some history about them. We'd like to take a look back at some of the drivers that paved the way and made racing into what it is today. So, Bert, before we get into the show here, a little shout out to Impact Health Sharing. Race fans, if you're paying for your own health care, if you don't have health care, if you're paying too much for health insurance, you got employees and you're getting just smoked on healthcare costs, shoot me a text, 218-969-1380. I can get you a quick quote. I can get you some information. I can have one of the gals from the office give you a call and get you all filled in on what Impact Health Sharing has to offer and see if we can keep some hard-earned money in your pockets so you can spend it on cool stuff like race cars, for example. So, number 77, Bert. So I got a bunch. I got a bunch of 77s. Do you have some 77s or perhaps 177?
I have no 177s. I have 2 locals and 1 national 77.
National. I don't know if I have a national. That'll be interesting.
Well, it's not a late model national. It's a sprint national.
Oh, dang it. I know who you got, and I should have had him. I did. I know who you got. All right. You go first. I'll let you go, and then and if you think you can kind of maybe ask me some questions, give some info, see if maybe I can guess it. We'll have a little fun with it.
Okay, well, the locals you probably wouldn't guess.
Probably not.
I will start locally. Chris Colross. He raced late models in Northeast Wisconsin, Shawano Speedway in the 1990s, maybe the 80s too, but definitely the 1990s. And he's another one of those drivers. Didn't necessarily win a lot, but he was at the track every week, giving it his all. So, and like we've said, the sport is driven by drivers like that.
For sure. I mean, we don't want 2-car feature races. We want to have a lot of cars, and so that obviously you must have a picture or two to send over to Mason. Yeah. So if you're watching this, of course, we have some pictures. Sometimes we find them ourselves. I got a buddy of mine, Lauren, that sends me pictures all the time, and he always has stuff to add. Thanks a lot, Lauren, for that. So it's kind of a fun aspect to this. If you're listening to it on podcast, this is one you might want to jump on over to our YouTube page, and when you do, right down here, hit subscribe. Right? If you're on our YouTube page, stop what you're doing, click subscribe. It's going to help us out. It helps us keep this show going. So, I got a trivia question for you, Bert. This gentleman won the very first Silver 1000 at the now Halberline Speedway in Proctor, Minnesota in 1973.
I don't know.
He's from Austin, Minnesota. This race actually was started by 3 people. One of them, our very own Crash Carlson, who works at Halberline's, good buddy of mine. It actually paid in actual silver dollars. Okay, first race. So $1,000 to win. I think it was $1,000 to win. I got a photo here, if you're watching this, of the car that won this race. And Lauren is actually at it. They used to have it. I remember I talked about Les Dolman, his dad. They had Elmer's Auto Salvage, Elmer's museum, car museum, and toy museum down by Fulton City. I went to that last year. That car that won that silver was at Elmer's there, and Lauren got a picture of it. It sold. They went into auction. And it sold to somebody locally. hopefully they restore it. Sounds like they want to get it running, but it'd be super cool to restore that. So the driver of that famous red 77, Dave Biorgi from Austin, Minnesota. I looked online. Guy won a lot of races, you know, and notably for us northern folks, the very first, the inaugural Silver 1000, which is if it's not the longest, it's the second longest running late model race that's been held at the same track. It might be tied with something, but the Silver 1000, they just had their 50th birth this last year, 50th. So 73, it's going to be their 51st this year. So Dave Biorgi, who do you got next?
The next one, I know nothing about this driver, and the only reason that I know he was number 77 was a couple of days ago on it's something like Wisconsin Auto Racing History Facebook page. The guy who runs that page he's gone back into newspapers and figured out the total feature wins for different tracks. I mean, even tracks in Western Wisconsin and stuff. But he posted a photo from a newspaper of Kevin G.O.A.T, G.O.A.T. He was number 77, but the picture he posted was in a newspaper, and he was involved in an accident at Shawano Speedway. And Kevin G.O.A.T is from Sheboygan, and I do remember him racing at Shawano Speedway, but I would have never remembered him for this segment if I hadn't have seen that picture just a couple of days ago.
And you're talking about the page, the Wisconsin dirt track racing page or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I got a little tidbit off that page for you as well, but we'll get to that in just a minute. So that is a pretty cool deal. That is cool to check out. So I have one from up in the North Country from this guy, I believe Ironwood, Michigan. I think he called home. Probably one of the most if not the most winningest, he's got to be right at the top of the list as far as the winningest drivers in the history of the ABC Raceway in Ashland, Wisconsin. I literally one time, Bert, I had a picture. I took a picture of his car one time as a 77, and it for the life of me, when I was looking through them years past, I had no idea that it was even him, because I remember this gentleman as number 80. So he ran number 77 in the street stocks, super stocks, kind of that type of class for a number of years, won a lot of races. And then he actually partnered up with a legend up there, AJ Johnson. And that's when he became number 80, because that's the number AJ was. AJ won a ton of races. Steve Stewart, who has 8 track championships over at the ABC Raceway, won the last 2 in the WISSOTA Superstock division, actually drives this guy's car. And I'm talking about Greg Kuklinski. This gentleman won a ton of races up there, has a storied career up in Ashland. If there was a big race in Ashland, he parked it in Victory Lane. A lot of stories about this guy. I don't know what's true and what's not. I raced against him a little bit, but there was rumors back in the day. I mean, way back in the day, Bert, everybody cheated. That's just what they did. So rumors was like he put a big stroker motor in, right? And he'd go race the heat race, qualify for the Red Clay Classic, go home, change motors, put the smaller one in for the feature, and be in contention. I don't know if that's true. That's folklore, right? That's folklore. I don't really know. But Greg Kuklinski, one thing I do know for sure is he was a fierce competitor, won a ton of races, mostly around Ashland, but I believe he ran in Iron River. I think he ran over in I know he ran in Superior, Proctor. So a gentleman that's still involved with racing today. What do you got next? Actually, you know what? I got a bunch, so I'm gonna take ahead of you. So if you have been to the Hibbing Raceway and you spent your life going to the Hibbing Raceway, the 77 means one thing. It means Ford Galaxies. There was a gentleman by the name of Ron Lampinen who passed I believe he passed a few years ago. I hope I'm not premature on that, but I'm pretty sure he did. He owned a pair of them. They called them Trixie and Dixie. Okay. So Fast Eddie Oz was one of them, and Thad Johannesson drove the other. Eddie Oz, his dad, Don Oz, drove the A1 car for years, legendary, first ballot Hall of Famer at the Hibbing Raceway. Don Oz still goes today. He's heavily involved, goes to the races all the time. Eddie Oz, he raced for a long time as well. both of these, they were hobby stocks back in the day, kind of more like a pure stock, I guess, with I think they had 350s in them. So kind of like a pure stock, street stock class. So he actually, I remember Bert, I was pretty young. He actually lettered my cars. He was very artistic, and he was one. It was Oz Signs. Him and Mark Tremberth, who has Mark Signs, Lem, who does some cool stuff for racing today, were kind of the two for the longest time that hand lettered cars kind of during that era. And on the back of his cars, he used to have mall car shows. He had painted nude pictures of girls with, you know, kind of a provocative look to them. And as a 15, 16-year-old kid, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's freaking awesome, right? So all of us horny little teenage boys got a kick out of that. And when they had kids nights, when they had kids rides, like we're like, I'll ride on that car. I want to see that naked girl that he painted. I think they actually eventually made him kind of tape over that during kids rides. I'm not sure, but Eddie Oz actually went on. He won a bunch of races there. Went on to the super stock division and was highly competitive. Won races in the supers. No longer racing today. He goes to the races with his dad. They're fans up in Hibbing and Grand Rapids. And Thad Johansson, he lives down in Tennessee now, down by Clarksville. And he actually transitioned to a super stock as well. One of the fastest guys around in the Leapers, a fierce competitor kind of in the early 90s, still heavily involved with racing. You know, he goes to a lot of races, whether it's dirt track, NASCAR, you name it. But those Ford Galaxies, Bert, up in Hibbing and Grand Rapids, legendary. They were absolutely legendary. So a little throwback to Ron Lampinen, Eddie Oz, and Thad Johansson.
Okay, I only have one more national sprint car driver, and this was my favorite driver. I wasn't really aware of sprint cars for the most part, but when I was in college, so this was in the early 90s, during the winter months, they had a little sprint car series at some little Manzanilla or something in Arizona.
Manzanita, yeah.
They would have every week on TNN. I don't know if you remember the cable channel TNN.
I do, yep.
Every week they would have a race on TNN from Manzanita Speedway, and it was sprint cars. And this, for some reason, I don't know why, but this was my favorite sprint car driver from that.
Is it Dave Blaney?
No.
Well, he was a Vibrant 10. Who?
Yeah.
77. Who would that have been?
It's a red car. He raced a bunch of different numbers, but he was 77 when I watched him race. Stevie Smith.
Really? Okay. I don't remember him in the 77. I remember, did Stevie Smith drive for the Motter team too in 71?
I don't know. When I was looking for photos, there was a number 19 also that apparently.
Okay. So, I remember that name though. There's a throwback for you. Threw me a curve. Bert, of all people, with a sprint car. Wow, that's a good job. Good, that's a good one. I have another sprint car guy, Bert, and I think I'm accurate on this, but Dave Blaney, I believe he came to the Cedar Lake Speedway, him and Matt Kenseth, and they had a night where he actually hopped in a super stock. Boy, I feel like the super stock he drove had a 77 on the side of it. And him and Kenseth went out and they actually raced. I think they just raced together. And I think one of them, Blaney, I think, was actually going to race with the whole field. Kenseth was just going to do the duel. He was a little bit off the pace. He was not a good driver. But Dave Blaney, I think he wadded that one up. It might have been Kelly Anderson. Maybe Kelly Anderson, maybe Joe Hinkemeyer's. I'm going to have to talk to Fatty over at Affordable, see if I can get a picture of that, because I believe Dave Blaney was in a 77 super stock at the Cedar Lake Speedway, probably would have been early 2000s, somewhere in that neighborhood. So I should have had that here, but I just thought of that one right there. Maybe somebody has some information. Bert, I have a 177.
Okay.
A 177 Southern Minnesota super stock driver. I made many laps against this guy when I went down to the old Fox Ridge Speedway in Arcadia, Mississippi. Well, it was actually, at the time, it was a tri-oval speedway in Fountain City, which is now the Mississippi Thunder Speedway. I believe I raced against him at Deer Creek and Casson, but Troy Brand always had some colorful looking cars. The 177 on the side of that, pretty fast runner too. He's always a top 5 guy every time I went down there. And I got him on Facebook and tried to get a hold of him. I haven't talked to him in a long time. But Troy Brand from Southern Minnesota, you got any? And fans, when you're watching this, again, below here, make sure to subscribe. But also in the comments, post your favorite stories. Maybe if you have some pictures, post all that stuff. Give us some information. We'd love to reminisce. Another gentleman from over, I think he was from Ashland, tragically passed a few years back now, at a pretty young age. I'm not sure the details on it. Brian Nevela in the 77. Now, what's interesting, Bert, the picture I have of Greg Kuklinski's 77 and the picture I have of Brian Nevela's 77, they literally look like really close to the same, right? So for the longest time, I thought it was the same guy, and it wasn't. One was Kuklinski, one was Nevela. Now, Brian Nevela, I got a little bit of information from a friend of mine, Steve, and he said, his family, they actually used to own a parts store over in, I believe, Ashland, and they had a huge ties. They were very instrumental in the beginning years of the ABC Raceway and the association they have today in Ashland, Wisconsin. I believe I don't know if it'd be ex-wife or widow, maybe that's, I don't know all the details on that. Maybe they were divorced before, but she's actually on the board still at the ABC Raceway. So still ties, and his son, Jake Nevela, is going to be a rookie this year in the WISSOTA Superstock division. So Jake, good luck to you here in 2023. Bert, back in it would have been the early 80s. I talk about it all the time. Ron Jones drove for my dad. It was one of the funnest years I ever had as a kid, right? I fell in love with racing that year. Well, if you're a racer, or if you've been around racing, one thing that you know is, like, if you're a racer and you go to tracks, back in the day, the kids didn't really go into pits, right? So you kind of found what they call the track mom, right? So, like, we're going to go down in the pits, and I know them. Go hang out with them over there. That's kind of how that went, right? I did it to Whitney. My dad did it to me many times, right? Well, the cool part about that is Steve Rudiger and Arvid Jeske. Arvid Jeske, of course, the 77 I'm talking about, their wives, they all knew Joneses and everybody. They're like, yeah, you can come sit with us. So I sat with them for years, and I became a huge Arvid Jeske fan. He ran a super stock at Menominee. He came up on Labor Day. And Don Hankey might kind of hurt my feelings one year because, I don't know, they got into an argument. He said, Arvid, you don't need to ever come back here. And I was like 7. I was crying. He's like, he told me can't come back anymore. I was all upset, right? And so it was, I got a big picture at home that says to my number 1 fan, Ryan. And I haven't talked to Arvid Jeske. Don't even know if he's still around, but I haven't talked to them guys in eons. So I would love to hear if he's still around. It'd be kind of fun to connect with old Arvid Jeske. Another one. Now we're going to get into a little trivia, Bert. Okay. We're going to go back to Hibbing, Minnesota. We're going to go to the year 1977. I don't know if you're going to know this name or not. Okay, so this driver here won the 1977 late model invitational at our very own Hibbing Raceway in Hibbing, Minnesota. Passed a guy that you wouldn't know who this is, but everybody up north of the border would. Passed a guy by the name of John Jones, who was kind of, Tom Nesbitt, they always say he was the biggest deal in Thunder Bay. He was the biggest deal after John Jones. John Jones was the biggest deal in Thunder Bay. Then it was Nesbitt. Then it was Kreiderman. That's how that kind of worked. John Jones, highly successful business guy up there. But he passed him with about 2 to go in lap traffic. Bert, get this. This is 1977. Paid $1,500 to win. It was an $11,000 purse. Now, if you look at a lot of these late model specials, that's basically what they pay today, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some that pay more, but there's a ton of late model races that are $1,500 to win. I promise you, $1,500 to win in 1977 is a hell of a lot more than it is today, right? So kind of crazy. Dave Bjorgi, incidentally, finished 7th in this race. So this gentleman, Red Drail, Red Trail, the guy that, you know,
That one.
I remember the name. I remember the name, and I looked it up. I'm like, a 1977 late model race in Hibbing. I'll go with that. 1977, kind of a cool deal. So, Bert, have you studied up on your World 100 trivia here?
I have not.
Bert. So 1977, I told you I was going to do this. You better study up. 1977 World 100 winner, a driver. Get this. It's the second straight year a driver from Dalton, Georgia, won the race. It's kind of neat, different guy. Because last week's guy won, he's from Dalton, Georgia. Doug Kennemer. You ever heard that name before? Old late model guy, World 100
I have
winner.
not.
We're gonna have to maybe look up, find some pictures of old Doug Kennemer there. All right, this is my buddy Lem's favorite driver right here, 1977. There's not a lot of races that kind of date back to the 70s, Bert, as far as big ones. But the National 100, isn't the National 100? That's at East Alabama, right? That's Buka's race, starts at like 10 in the morning type deal.
Might be.
So in 1977, the National 100 winner from Cornelia, Georgia, the legendary Buck Simmons, got that one done. That's kind of a neat little stat there. So you're talking about your Wisconsin dirt track racing page, Bert. So I got a little tidbit from you, the 1977 Wisconsin dirt track racing page. Who was the most winning driver in the late model division in 1977?
I'll say Roger Regas.
Ding, 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 ding. You're good at this game, Bert. Good job. Yeah, good old Roger. Did they call him the Bear? Is that what they called him?
Yes.
Yep.
And actually, this last weekend, Wisconsin International Raceway in Kaukauna, they had a Tundra race, which is a series for asphalt late models. But Roger Regas passed away within the last year, so they called it the Bear 66 race because he was number 66.
Nice.
Well, he was number 66 amongst some other numbers also. He was also 96.
That's a good tribute. That's a good tribute. So Mark Gelstad of Eau Claire, street stock driver, was the winningest driver in the state of Wisconsin in 1977. He ran a street stock, ran at the Eau Claire Speedway, the Red Cedar Speedway, the Racers Raceway in Bruce, Wisconsin. 33 feature wins. Kind of a neat stat there. If anybody knows Mark Gelstad, Kjelstad of Wisconsin there. 1977, last one I got for you here. We're going to bring it back, Bert. This is kind of a neat one right here. We're going to go back to Volusia. The Winter Nationals down in Volusia, 1977. But first, little thoughts and prayers to the family and friends of Dick Murphy. So Dickie Murphy, 81 years old, Bert, longtime promoter and owner of the Volusia Speedway. Of course, sold it. It's been sold a couple times since. He actually owned the old Flintstone Flyer ride, Mike Duvall, when he won the World 100. So heavily involved with racing, but over the past week here, lost his life. So there was 4 nights of racing held at the Volusia Speedway during the Winter Nationals in 1977. The final night was won by a guy named Don Hester. Don't know that. The first 3 nights were by a NASCAR driver that, if you watch NASCAR for sure through probably the late 70s, for sure through the 80s, right? This gentleman was in pretty much every race. He won, and he wasn't like the most winning NASCAR driver, but he was always there. He was always there. He won the first 3 nights. Bert, can you guess it?
Ricky Rudd?
Nope. Think when he was racing, he was kind of that older, scruffy, older guy. I think he was older. When he raced.
Harry Gant?
That's a good guess. But what if I go like this? Captain?
Morgan Shepherd.
Mm-hmm. Morgan Shepherd. I didn't even know that he raced their late models at Volusia.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, I was looking back at the stats. 1977 Volusia Speed Weeks, first 3 nights, Morgan Shepherd. I'm like, well, I'll be damned. That's kind of cool. So, Bert, always a good time, kind of taking a turn back in time and kind of reminiscing and kind of looking up some stats. Like to put a little bit more time into our research over the coming numbers. Of course, next week, number 78. I have a couple 78s that are near and dear to the heart that I remember, but 178, I'd have to really look to see if I can find one. Number 78, fans, if you're watching this, hit us up, right? Don't be afraid to shoot us pictures, text messages, Facebook message, however you want, of any driver that you can think of that's 78, 79, 80, 81. There's a bunch of 77s still racing. One of them's a legend. He's been racing forever. And I had a few people say, you got to mention this guy, old Alan Olofsson. But guess what? He's still racing, right? So we're not going to get into all of the stats. It's not really a blast to the past. But thanks for tuning in. I hope everybody enjoys the content, enjoys the show. Of course, check out our main show, the One to Go show. And check out our WISSOTA recap shows that are going to be out in our power rankings for all the classes. Check out all the content. Hit us up if you have any questions, comments, feedback, whatever it may be. And we'll see you guys next week. I'm Ryan Aho. That is the Bert Lehman. Thanks for tuning in to A Blast from the Past. To the past? From the past? I'm not really sure. We'll get that.